Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. So many stories today that I had to cut one to make room. Also, we have two guests on the show today.
Is that a lot?
Yes, it is. Sylvia Shults is back with another round of incredible ghost stories. Yeah! And then we meet Alton Chung, a professional storyteller who will read a tale about a haunted man cave.
Cave? What cave?
You're gonna have to wait and see. And it all begins right now with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by His Girl Friday. I know what you're thinking. Isn't that supposed to be His Man Friday? Well, boys and girls, that is not the case today. Let's listen to this week's 5-minute extravaganza and see.
It is after showtime in a downstairs restaurant in Lower New York. Pat Logan, private detective, and his girl Friday, Diana Bellows, are out for an evening's entertainment.
2 more, Tony.
Sure, Mr. Logan. You have it right away.
Oh, Pat, isn't it wonderful? The whole evening to ourselves. No murders, no robberies. Nothing but fun.
Well, I promised you this evening out, didn't I? As soon as the Morrison case was closed.
I know, Pat. I think maybe that's why I like you so.
Like me?
Well, maybe a little more.
Mr. Logan.
Yes, Tony, what's the matter? No more antipasto?
No, Mr. Logan, it's worse than that. Something terrible.
Well, what is it? What's happened?
In the back room, Joe Matelli, the owner of this place. He's just been shot.
All right, Tony. And you, Mr. Koski. I'd like to talk to both of you in here. Diane, the coroner will be here any minute. He might need your help.
All right, Pat, I'll go wait for him.
Now then, let's get this story straight. Mr. Koski, Tony tells me you discovered the body.
That's right. I just left Joe not more than 3 or 4 minutes before. He'd been in a depressed mood for days over some money he owed, but the suicide really gives me a turn.
How soon would you say you got to the body after the shot was fired, I mean?
Oh, just a matter of seconds. I was in the next room when I heard the shot. I ran in just as Joe was slumping to the floor.
And the gun, this gun right here, was in his hands.
That's right, Mr. Logan. It dropped right then when he fell.
Uh-huh. And you, Tony?
Yeah, I heard the shots, too, just as I was coming up from the wine cellar. When I come in, Koski was standing over Joe.
Mm-hmm. I noticed this gun is a police special, the regulation kind for the police department. Anyone know how come it came to be in Joe's possession?
Yeah, he had it for some time, Mr. Logan. He had a brother-in-law in the force and borrowed it for protection.
And now he uses it to commit suicide with. Rather ironic, I should say.
Yeah, it is, all right.
Pat.
Yes, Diane.
The coroner just moved the bullet. He thought you'd probably want to look at it. Here it is.
Yes. Fine. 45 caliber. Fired at close range.
If you want anything more, I'll stick
Hey,
around.
wait a minute. Diane, you're sure this is the bullet? The suicide bullet itself?
Well, of course, Pat. Why not?
Just that this little bullet changes the whole picture.
What do you mean?
Just this, Mr. Koski. Joe Matelli didn't commit suicide any more than I did. He was murdered.
I thought there was something funny here.
Murder?
Yes, Mr. Koski, murdered. And I think you're in for another surprise right on top of that one. Because you're under arrest, Koski, for that same murder.
So the supposed suicide was murder after all, and Mike Koski is under arrest. Do you know the clue? In a moment, we'll hear, but first...
Man, I thought it was going to take him forever to put that together. The gun in question was a .38 police special, and the bullet was from a .45. I wonder if that had anything to do with this case. Nah, I'm sure that just has to be a coincidence. Now, let's get back to the story.
And now, back to our mystery.
What's the matter with you, Logan? Everything checks, doesn't it?
Yes, Koski, everything checks. You testified when you entered the room a moment before Mutelli fell to the floor. This suicide gun was still in his hands.
So what?
That gun was not the death weapon, Koski, and this bullet proves it. You might be interested to know all regulation police guns, like the one Mutelli was supposed to have killed himself with, are 38 calibers. And this bullet, the death bullet, is a 45. It just wouldn't fit.
Okay, I gotta say it if nobody else will. And since I'm the only one here, I will say it. If the bullet doesn't fit, then you have to do the opposite of acquit, which means we have our man Friday, which should not be confused by our girl Friday, who just happens to be named Friday? Confused? This was our 5-minute mystery.
What's that you say?
I received this email from Bent Heridian from Parts Unknown. I could not trace down the IP address other than it is from an international Google account. I looked up the origin of the name, and it quite possibly could be Danish. Also, it could be my next-door neighbor. I really can't be sure. Bent writes, Ron, the podcast is amazing. I listen every week and appreciate the randomness of it all. I do have a question on something you said on your Halloween show. You said that you were a guest on Jim Harold's Halloween Video Party 2019. I would very much like to see that. I looked for it and didn't find it. Is it still around? Bent. Thank you for the question. I just checked and it is still there to be viewed. I came on the show for about an hour and had a whole lot of fun. Although looking back, my costume was not the best. You see, I was going for a Men in Black look. It came out looking like something out of Urban Cowboy. The link is kinda complicated, so I don't want to give it here, but if you go to the main website and search for episode number 408, the link is in the show notes, and it really does work. A few weeks ago, I told you about a ghost-themed show that I have planned and that I was looking for a co-host. I received an email response from Alton Chung. He is a full-time professional storyteller based in Vancouver, Washington, and has a passion for ghost stories. Alton performs at storytelling festivals internationally, sharing stories and legends from Hawaii, and generally spreading aloha. He has agreed to join me for this special podcast, and I couldn't be more thrilled. Thank you, Alton. Later in the show today, Alton will perform for us reading a ghost story sent in by Jesse Simmons from Bedford, New York. So be looking for that in just a bit. Now, having said all of that, I'm still looking for your scary stories about ghosts, poltergeists, and head scratchers to fill that show. I've picked out 2 so far, but I need at least 4 good ones for the show. The recording date is set for April 9th, so please get your stories in. We really do need them. And now, this message from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. Do you need an idea for a present for your Valentine? How about an audiobook? Let's go a step further. How about a humorous paranormal romance? Double Double, Love and Trouble by our very own Sylvia Shults, narrated by Heather Costa. Meet Selena Good. She's a herbalist, she runs a small museum in Salem, and she's a practicing solitary Wiccan. She likes her life quiet as it is. Then Brian Gotchick comes barreling into it with the force of an Atlantic storm. He works for a ghost hunting TV show, and he's in Salem to find a story. He's witty, charming, and a total jerk. Selena has no problem with ghosts. She does, however, have a big problem with Big City Brian. It will take all his charm, plus the silent advice of a caring ghost, to make Selena realize that maybe being a big city guy isn't so bad after all. This book is both laugh-out funny and edge-of-your-seat suspenseful. Double Double, Love and Trouble is a sexy, humorous romp from our very own Sylvia Shults. Let it cast its spell over you. You can have this book today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you too can have Double Double, Love and Trouble today. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
This story comes by way of Mexico from Gabriel Jordan. Gabe lives in Texas City, Texas. I have edited this one and received complete approval from Gabe. He has titled this story, The Night I Will Never Forget. Hey Ron, I love the podcast and never miss an episode. I know that you like strange stories from the South, and I have one from Mexico. I'm 16 years old now, and this happened to me when I was 8. We went to Mexico to visit my grandparents with my 2 brothers for the summer. It was a good trip. We visited places like the Aztec ruins and the tropical waters of the Gulf. Grandma took us to a little house in the country that she grew up in as a child. It was pretty old, and it looked like it could collapse at any moment. But we stayed the night anyway. There were no utilities, so we built a campfire, got some water from the creek, and ate s'mores. That night, we all told scary stories from Mexican urban legends. Grandma mentioned La Llorona, El Coca, and La Chuza, the barn owl. They also mentioned the Chupacabra. My parents have told us about the cryptid since I was 6 years old. They have had many encounters with them growing up in southern New Mexico. Later in the evening, my brothers tried to scare me, saying that they saw one of the beasts and that it was coming for me. I wasn't impressed. It was bedtime, and I went to sleep and dozed off. I awoke in the middle of the night for no reason. I heard a strange noise outside, and I stupidly looked out the window. I couldn't remember much, but I saw a weird, skinny, hairless creature standing outside. I freaked out and hid under the blankets. I heard scratching noises all night, and I couldn't sleep. When it was morning, I went outside. I went to a tree and saw claw marks scratched into it. My brothers saw them as well. My brother Samuel smelled something horrible, and we all decided to go check it out. Near the creek, we found a fresh deer carcass with punctures on its stomach. I didn't know what was going on, but my brother said, "It's the Chupacabra." We were all creeped out and decided to get out of there. We never told our grandparents or parents, and we acted like it never happened. 3 years passed, and now I'm 11. My mom told us that we would visit my grandparents again with my older cousin. I was happy to see them after 3 years. This trip, we visited Cancun and Mexico City. Then we went to that very same cabin from 3 years ago. My grandparents had completely renovated the place, but it still had no running water or electricity. I had forgotten about the incident when I was 8, but when I arrived, memories of that night came flooding back into my head. I was scared, and I didn't want to stay, but I couldn't tell anyone that, so I sucked it up and went to bed. I awoke to a scratching sound. I knew it was the Chupacabra. I looked out the window, and this time I didn't see anything. I blinked my eyes many times, gave up, and decided to go back to bed. I was awoken again by twigs snapping just outside the window. It was very loud. I looked out and saw that same creature silhouetted against the night sky. It quickly ran away, but before it did, we locked eyes. It was like he remembered me too. The next morning, after a delicious breakfast, I went outside. I saw broken twigs and sticks everywhere just outside my window. However, oddly, there weren't any footprints. I returned to the tree from 3 years ago, and there were fresh claw marks scratched right next to the old ones. I told my cousin, who saw them too, the whole story. He was pretty spooked, but wanted to go investigate the nearby forest. We came across a dead coyote that had been ripped apart. It had 2 small puncture wounds on what was left of its stomach. That was it for me, but my cousin was dumb and went deeper into the forest. He was gone about 30 minutes. When he returned, his face looked like he had witnessed somebody getting shot. He was pale as a ghost and looked scared. "What happened?" I asked. He lifted up his arm and revealed an angry claw mark on his side. He also had 2 red dots on his back that resembled the 2 punctures on the deer and coyote. To this day, my cousin will not say what he saw or what happened when he went into that forest. I'm just glad he returned and is still alive. We have no plans to go back to Mexico, and my grandparents sold the property about a year later. To this day, I sometimes still hear that scratching and clawing from when I encountered the Chupacabra. Gabe Jordan, Texas City, Texas. Gabe, that has to be one of the creepiest Chupacabra stories I've ever heard. I've never heard of them attacking humans before, and always thought they tended to shy away. I would love to know what happened to your cousin. If you are willing and he ever tells you, please write us back with the rest of the story. Thank you for sharing this, and I too am happy that all of you survived that night. Our next story is a treat for me because I'll not be reading it. As I mentioned at the top, we have a guest today. Alton Chung will read this story that was sent in by Jesse Simmons from Bedford, New York. Here is Alton reading the story that Jesse has titled The Haunted Man Cave.
Hello, Ron. I love the podcast and wanted to thank you for it. I heard you asking for ghost stories and thought you might like this. My dad passed away a couple years ago. On my parents' property, they had a small house that was separate from their main house. My dad basically used it as his man cave. He would go out there and watch sports or whatever. He decorated it the way he liked it, and it was really his happy place. After he passed away, no one else really had a use for the house. So my mom sold it to this woman that my uncle knows. She renovated it to a farmhouse-style look and began renting it out on Airbnb. There were problems from the start. She called my uncle and told him that my dad had visited her. She never met my dad while he was alive. She said that he told her that he doesn't like her, and he hates what she did to this house. Soon after, a woman who rented it for one night told her the next morning that the house was haunted. All night she kept hearing voices, and the television would change channels for no reason, always to ESPN. When my uncle told us about it, my mom and I looked at each other and we both said, That sounds just like him to say that. He was never one to mince words. My mom also said she didn't like the woman that bought the house from the time she met her. When my mom didn't like someone, my dad automatically didn't like them either. It's nice to know that even though he's gone, he still supports my mom like that. Jesse Simmons, Bedford, New York.
Well, first my thanks to Jesse for sending that story in. That is a definite haunting for sure, and to have 2 witnesses for confirmation, that's amazing. I also want to thank Alton for reading this. Man, you did a great job, and I really do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working with you on our special podcast set for April 9th. For the listeners, that podcast should air 1 week later, April 16th, on both radio and podcast. The subject for that podcast will be storytelling and ghost stories. We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Shults is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and The Spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. Are you there, Sylvia?
I'm here. Come on in, Ron.
I don't know, Sylvia. I have had such a rough week. I don't know. I might not be good company this time.
Oh, Ron, you are always good company. Here, let me make it all better. Sit down in this chair and let me offer you a box of Valentine's chocolates.
Well, you know what they say about chocolates.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get. And if you get a coconut cream, I promise you don't have to eat it. How's that?
I like coconut cream. Well, Sylvia, thank you for the chocolate. And I guess I'll begin with, how have you been?
I have been doing really,
good.
really well. I love the chocolate caramel.
Yeah, those are pretty good. You know, I'm not really a big sugar fan. I try to stay away from it, but my goodness, these are absolutely marvelous.
It's Valentine's Day.
Oh, do I sense a theme for our chat today? Because you haven't told me what it is today. What is it?
We most certainly do have a theme. We are going to talk about romantic ghosts.
Oh, sappy stuff?
Not necessarily. It's not all sap. I promise it's not all sap.
Will I get my cup full of chills?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
All right. Well, before we get to that, Sylvia, you know that I have a sponsor for this show. I'm sure you're aware of him.
Oh, yes.
And I'm not talking Gladys Goodies here. I'm talking Audible.
A wonderful service.
Every week, I have to come up with something that I'm listening to, and I present it to the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I go through and I look for things, and darned if I didn't find a book here called Double Double, Love and Trouble. Do you have something that you want to tell me, Sylvia?
Well, that sounds awfully familiar, Ron, because that is one of my humorous romances, and it's got ghost characters in it.
So here's the thing, people. I'm telling you this. You may not have known this. We've talked about it briefly, but at one point, Sylvia was a horrific romance novelist. And by that, I mean, she wasn't bad. She just wrote horror romance. Is that true, Sylvia?
That is true. That is true. I wrote some humorous romance, and I also wrote horror novels and horror short stories. So sometimes one kind of sneaked over into the other a little bit. Some of my romances have ghosts and, mostly ghosts.
Well, here's the thing about that. When I'm doing searches, they always present the ones that are popular first.
Mm-hmm.
And this was pretty high up on the list. What's with that?
I am very happy to say that it's very popular right now, and as well it should be. If you are looking for a wonderful present to give your Valentine this year, you can't go wrong with a book, and especially an audio book. Somebody sits and reads it to you. Somebody tells you a story, just like Ron and I do. So I would highly suggest that you go on to Audible. You're supporting Ron's amazing stories, and take a look at Double Double Love and Trouble. You'll get a laugh out of it. You'll get a giggle.
All right. Well, why don't you just give us a brief synopsis so people can know what it's about?
Absolutely. I was just thinking about doing that. There is a practicing Wiccan in Salem, Massachusetts, who runs into a producer for a ghost hunting show. And he comes to Salem looking for shows, and he decides to interview this girl, and sparks fly because they don't get along. She thinks he's a raging jerk, and he thinks, well, how flaky is this? She's an herbalist, she's a Wiccan, and they don't get along real well at first. But there are some ghostly interferences that eventually bring the couple together.
So it truly is a romance.
Right. Brian and Selena do find their way to each other's arms and have a few laughs along the way.
Okay. Well, that again was Double Double Love and Trouble. All right, Sylvia, you have stories. We want to hear them. What have you had for us this time? I know we have Valentine's stories because you've already told us that.
Yes, I couldn't resist the Valentine's Day ghost stories. Well, that box of chocolates I offered you reminded me that there is a haunted chocolate shop in England. The UK has a chain of chocolate shops. It's called Thornton's. They're kind of like our Fannie Mae, and there are Thornton's all over the place. And the Thornton's chocolate shop on Eastgate Street in Chester, England, is actually haunted. In the late 18th, early 19th century, there was a young lady named Sarah who lived on Eastgate Street. And she was a beautiful young girl. She was going to get married, and she fell in love with this fellow named Wilhelm, and they were going to get married, and he jilted her. He left her standing at the altar. And Sarah was so distraught by this that she went to her home on Eastgate Street. She left the church, went straight home, and hanged herself. She was so upset over the loss of her fiancé. So she now haunts this chocolate shop. And she really, really does not like men for obvious reasons. She has displayed some possessive abilities. The manager of the chocolate shop was a woman, was coming down the stairs one day, and she was wearing 21st century work clothes to work in this chocolate shop. So for women nowadays, that's shirt and pants. But she was coming down the stairs with dainty little steps, kind of holding an invisible skirt up at her side as she was walking down the stairs to this shop. And her employees are like, what is wrong with you? And she kind of snapped out of it. And all they could think of was that she had been momentarily possessed by the spirit of Sarah. Now, Sarah, she really doesn't like men. She pushed an American down the steps. The American heard about this ghost story and is like, oh, no, I don't believe in ghosts. I think that's a load of bourgeois. And then Sarah pushed him down the steps. He was okay, but he believes in ghosts after that. She has also displayed some poltergeist tendencies. Around Valentine's Day every year, the chocolate shop does a display of Valentine heart chocolate boxes and other boxes of chocolate in the display too. They will come in and they will find all of the Valentine heart boxes strewn all over the floor, just the display ripped apart and chocolates all over the floor, but only the heart-shaped boxes. The other boxes of chocolate in front on the display are completely untouched.
Boy, she holds a grudge, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. But there was one time where Sarah's dislike of men actually was very, very helpful. There was a fellow who broke into the shop one night, and he broke into the safe, and he was about to make off with the day's take. And Sarah chased him away. He ended up leaving the money, his burglary tools, and a full set of fingerprints. In that instance, Sarah was actually helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. So you said you thought that the boxes strewn around was poltergeist activity. I don't know that follows. Isn't poltergeist activity, the way I understand it, isn't it an actual person, a living human being that is projecting the activity? Or do I have a misconception of poltergeists?
No, that is definitely one of the causes of poltergeist activity. But sometimes there is no explanation for it. Sometimes it's just the ghost kicking up. There are some times where they can trace the activity to psychokinesis, which is where somebody is very, whether they know it or not, and usually they don't know it, they're so emotionally wrought up that the emotions come out in the form of knocking things over, setting fires, throwing rocks, ripping up bedclothes, stuff like that. Sometimes that is the result of psychokinesis.
Which isn't paranormal, right? You wouldn't consider that paranormal, would you?
It's paranormal, but it's not supernatural. It's outside the normal way of the way things happen, but it's not due to any ghostly activity. It's due to just an excess of energy from this person that has abilities that most of us don't have.
All right. Well, let's go to one of your ghost hunts. When you are using a meter and you're holding it and you're asking the ghost to come forward, and when they do, the meter goes off. How is that different than these boxes being strewn around?
Knocking over displays and tossing boxes on the floor takes a whole lot more energy than just coming close to a meter and allowing that bit of electricity to move the needle on the meter. And I have seen, with my own eyes, I have seen instances where ghosts have used a lot more energy than just moving the needle on a meter. I was at the Peoria State Hospital in the Pollock Hospital, and I watched, it was a big empty electrical spool. It was sitting on its side, and I watched it roll forward 6 inches without anyone being within 3 feet of the thing.
Wow.
That took a lot of energy.
Okay. So again, I'm going to say, to me, that's energy spent, but not poltergeist activity.
Right. That had nothing to do with poltergeist. That had to do with a spirit really wanting to make itself known. We tend to call that poltergeist activity when it's destructive, just because that's what people kind of expect.
Okay.
You say poltergeist, you say, well, oh, there's destruction, there's things being thrown around.
And pardon me, I'm not trying to be a pain or a pest, but but what I'm getting at is that, to me, she was angry at these boxes. And she goes there and then just blasts energy at something that means something to her. Love is something she wants nothing to do with, so she blasts these boxes with energy and they go flying. But to me, poltergeist energy is usually, or poltergeist seems like it would be meant to either cause harm or to call attention, saying, hey, there's something wrong with me. Am I just missing the boat here?
No, I would agree with that. Definitely. And Sarah is expressing her displeasure that other people are having happily ever afters that she didn't get to have. I think it's the same thing.
Okay.
Really.
Well, I disagree.
Okay. It's happened before that
It
you and I
has,
have
and
disagreed
it's
on.
going to happen again. I'm just, maybe it's my mindset. I'm always thought that a human was responsible. Human being emotions, you mentioned kinetic energy, are responsible for poltergeist activity, and that's, I think, where I need to do my research and figure that out in my mind.
Okay, I see. Yeah, when we talk about poltergeist activities, sometimes it's a human agent doing it. A lot of the times it's a human agent doing it, and sometimes it's just something inexplicable that's going on in the house, and there really isn't a cause for it. You can't point your finger at some tween girl or a kid on the cusp of adolescence, which is what usually these agents usually tend to turn out to be. Sometimes there isn't a person like that in the house.
Yeah. I'm reminded, Hans Holzer, is that how you say that?
Yeah.
I was reminded of one of his things just now, and what he determined that is there's usually a quick beginning and then a definite end to poltergeist activity. Would you agree with that?
I would. Every story I've read, it doesn't last more than a couple of years. A couple of years is a long time to put up with a poltergeist. And then, boom, it's done, and it never happens again. That's the pattern most of the cases follow.
Well, I think I've taken us about as far off pace as we possibly can get. That has nothing to do with Valentine's, nor does it have anything to do with the story. I don't know. It just came to me, and I apologize to the listeners once again for going off the bubble.
I'm sure the listeners don't mind all that much when we go off on our little tangents, but let's get back to the romance.
All right. How about you tell me a story about my boyfriend is a ghost?
I would be delighted to. So for several months in the 1880s, and I'm not exactly sure where this happened, so I can't share that with you. There was a young girl, Layla Alexander. She was a sensitive young girl. She actually carried on a courtship with the handsome ghost of a man who had once lived in her home. Her family moved into this house, and the previous owner's belongings were still there. The owner had died very suddenly, and the man's library was full of books on hauntings and spooky things and the occult. And it was there that Layla actually met this fellow's spirit. And Layla was so enchanted with this handsome man that she started sleepwalking, and she started carrying on conversations with this man's spirit while she was in a sleepwalking state. And this sleepwalking actually led to her demise. She wandered outside during a thunderstorm one night, and she was standing in the backyard talking with this ghost, half asleep, and she was struck and killed by lightning.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Now, before this happened, she was mooning around like this romantic young girl that she was, and she had written a letter to her family members, and she wrote about this ghost that she was kind of in love with, and the ghost had promised to wait for her in what she called a far-off country, which obviously means, that the country of death. This guy was there and she wasn't yet, but he promised to wait for her. And he would just wait for her to come to be by his side someday. The interesting part about this is that decades later, the house was being renovated. And the construction workers that were doing the renovation found a cellar, found a little hidden room underneath the library wing. And in that cellar, they found the skeleton of a young man.
Wow.
So when Layla's family was told about this, the workers came and said, hey, we found the skeleton of this guy underneath your library. And they made the decision. They took up the bones, and her family buried those bones next to Layla's grave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a sweet ending to a rather gruesome story.
Yeah, that's a winner, all right.
I do know that the temperatures when hit by lightning are incredible.
Yes.
So
yes, it's several times
imagine.
hotter than the surface of the sun.
Yeah, something
I've
along
heard.
those lines, yeah. So
Sure.
that is not a way to go. Or I guess it might be quick, I guess.
Very, very quick, yes. Very quick.
That is a great story. I
Thank
like
you.
that one. And it's not too sappy so far. I mean, we have a ghost that shoved a guy down the stairs and another one struck by lightning. That isn't sappy at all. And I'm enjoying myself so far.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Now, I happen to know you've got one more story for us.
I do. And I saved this one for last. And I hope I don't sniffle or break down in it because it's a very, very sweet story. So this story, I can tell you where this happened. This actually happened at the haunted Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado.
The famous hotel?
Yes, the Stanley Hotel. This is where Stephen King was staying when he got the idea for The Shining and named it the Overlook Hotel. So this actually comes from the most haunted room in the Stanley Hotel, room 217. There's a fellow staying in that room, and before he went to bed, he opened one of the windows because it was a beautiful, cool night. So he wanted to get some air into the room. Nice breeze coming in, curtains stirring in the breeze. He climbed in under the covers and got all snuggly and fell asleep. He was asleep for a couple of hours, and then something woke him, and it was the feeling of his wife climbing out of the bed to go stand by the window. And the man said he opened his eyes, and he looked over to the open window, and he saw his wife standing by the window, and the window glass was open, but the screen was still up on the window, and his wife was standing there with her face pressed against the screen, just gazing out at the lawn underneath the hotel window. And she said, "You have to see this," she whispered. She said, "There's a family of elk outside." And the man didn't move. He didn't get up from his bed. He just smiled, and he just watched his wife standing at the window for a long time and noticed how her hair would move in the breeze coming through the open window. And we can't really blame him for this because his wife had been dead for 5 years.
You're kidding.
Mm-mm.
Had they been in the room before at some point, or is this his first trip?
I do not know.
You gotta wonder, don't you?
Yeah.
Huh. Now, I happen to know that that hotel has just a ton of stories, and they continue to find stories. And haven't there even been ghost hunting shows that have gone there and found some pretty incredible evidence?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ghost hunting shows have been top to bottom on that place, and they have found all sorts of really fun stuff. They've seen shadow figures on the stairs. I mean, not creepy little twin girls holding hands and blood pouring down the corridors, nothing like that. But they've seen shadow figures on the stairs. They've done all sorts of recordings. Yeah, there's a lot going on at the Stanley Hotel.
I love that story. A little bit sappy.
Thank you.
Just a little, but perfect, but a perfect amount of sappy. So I appreciate that.
I just
story.
love that story.
That is a great one. And,
Thank you.
I love it because, again, we've talked about this so many times, and people are probably tired of me saying this, but one of the things I love about your stories is that the fact is, yeah, they're chilling, and yeah, some horrible things happen sometimes, but there's just this side to it that makes you go, yeah, but that's okay. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does to me. I mean, death is scary. The unknown is scary, but there are so many people that have gone through that, and they're on the other side, and they're waiting for us, and sometimes they give us little hints that they're still around. And that's what really keeps me going, keeps me sitting in dark places so that you don't have to. And that's what really grabs me about these stories is people have gone before us, and they're still around, and they let us know.
That's a great thought. That is a great thought. Just like this man lying in bed, seeing his wife standing there. That had to be just an absolute treat for him. Just
I can't even imagine, but it's such a blessing.
Well, Sylvia, I think it's time to start to talk about what's happening on the blog. I have questions.
What questions do you have?
My favorite music in the world is from the 60s and 70s. I love music from the 60s and 70s. But I've always been a fan of Chaka Khan, and I couldn't believe that you wrote a blog about Chaka Khan. I thought that was great.
Well, I love me some 80s music, but the blog post that I wrote was not about Chaka Khan.
It wasn't?
The blog post I wrote was about Shaka Zulu. He was the leader of the Zulu nation, and he had some very, very inauspicious beginnings. As a matter of fact, his name actually means intestinal parasite.
Okay, that just sounds off.
So, yeah, that was the Today I Learned for last Monday. So I try to keep my readers informed and entertained with my Today I Learned every Monday.
So we're not talking about the song, I don't know, Through the Fire, or Nobody from Charlie's Angels, or I Know You, I Live You. You're talking about some guy that was in Africa and was a warlord or something?
Right, yeah. Very powerful dude, but nothing to do with 80s music or 60s or 70s.
Chaka Khan does a great version of Hey Big Spender. You're not talking about that?
No.
How about Ain't Nobody? Da, 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 da. Not that?
Not ringing a bell. No.
Oh. Darn it.
Yeah, I go for mostly 80s music, and then I absolutely love ragtime, and I love Baroque music. I love classical music, but Baroque music I really, really love. And I think the reason I love those two forms so much is that they're both very rhythmic. Ragtime music, of course, very strong rhythm, and Baroque music. It's easy to follow. It's easy to listen to. It's got a good beat to it. So that's why I
Not like
like
Chaka Khan, though.
No. Not a huge fan.
Well, what's going on at on the podcast? Lights Out. One of my favorite this time, though.
Boy.
I gotta say, this week you outdid yourself. What a great show! What a great show!
Thank you very, very much. This week's this particular episode of Lights Out was my visit to the Sally House in Atchison, Kansas, and that is. That's a very dangerous place, I discovered. I discovered to my chagrin that there are things there's something at the Sally House that bears treating with respect. I know you and I talked about the Villisca House and how comfortable I was at the Villisca House. I still don't really consider myself a sensitive, but I have gotten to the point where I can walk into a building and kind of suss out the energy in the building.
Whether negative or positive.
Right. And sort of what's going on, kind of the feel the building has around me. And especially whether it's negative or positive. And the energy in the Villisca House, it was, for the most part, it was bright, it was cheerful, it was a house where a family was being raised and children were having fun. But I walked into the Sally House, and the energy there just felt sullen. Like, why are you here? What are you going to do? Just like this energy was pouting. It was very, very strange, and I had a lot of strange experiences in the house. I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone who wants to go and listen to it, but the Sally House is considered one of the most haunted houses in the United States, and I was privileged to visit it, and I had really incredible experiences there. I caught a couple of good EVPs, so that was fun.
And you can hear them during the show, too. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
They didn't need a lot of amplification to hear those, especially the nose.
No, I was really excited about that. When you catch a good EVP like that, boy, it just electrifies you.
And you heard nothing while it was being recorded?
No, No. All I saw, I was listening, but the only experience I had when it was being recorded was that the dowsing rods were swinging into a no answer position. And then even before they did, it turns out there was a no. Someone said no. And when I listened to the tape, I heard the no, and then I noted that the rods swung apart into a no answer. It was fascinating.
You know what I was thinking during the whole podcast? The thought kept coming to me that this house has got a trickster in it.
Yes. Big time trickster. The entity there showed itself as a cute little 7-year-old girl, and that's why they called it Sally. And that's how it manifested to the guy who lived there, Tony Pickman? I think his name is Tony Pickman. So yeah, it was Deborah Pickman, his wife, who wrote the book about the Sally House haunting, which is a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. But yeah, it manifested itself to the husband, and he drew a picture of this little girl he saw. And this little girl, what they thought was a little girl, would play with their infant son and move teddy bears around and roll balls, and they thought it was something harmless. They thought it was this harmless 7-year-old girl, and it turned out to be something much, much more serious, something that would start fires and light candles when no one was around, and start fires on other things. There was a teddy bear that caught fire and nearly caused some damage. And yeah, there have been ghost hunting shows that have gone there too. And I watched one after I put this podcast together. And this fellow, they were doing a Ouija board session down in the basement of all things.
One of the dumbest things you can do ever.
Right. And this guy seemed like he was being possessed by whatever was in the house. It was very eerie to watch. He was doing something called the Estes method. It's where you block off all your senses and you wait for things to happen to you. So he had ping pong ball halves over his eyes that were held in place with duct tape so he couldn't see anything. He had earphones on so he couldn't hear anything. And he was doing one part of the Ouija board with no sensory input at all. And that will really mess with you, especially in a place that has dark energy like that. Doing the Estes method you're not supposed to do it for more than about 20 minutes at a time because it will make you nauseous. It will mess with you.
Well, I never have to worry about that because you'll never find me at the Sally House, number one. And secondly, with ping pong halves on my eyes.
I'm not going back. I would love to go back to Villisca. I'm going back to Malvern Manor in a few months, but I am not going back to the Sally House. No, that's never going to happen.
I got to say, Sylvia, the whole podcast, I kept telling myself, this is a trickster. And usually tricksters are demons. Isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I have no desire to have anything to do with that whatsoever. So count me out of that trip if you ever do go back. I'm not going with you.
No fear. You and I will go to Villisca instead. Or
that sounds like a nice place. Gettysburg is on my bucket list. So
it's marvelous.
Yeah, you could talk me into that in a heartbeat.
Marvelous place.
Well, Sylvia, we have gone long enough, I think.
I think so.
And I know you hate to stop because we have so much fun. But unfortunately, we're only allowed 60 minutes per week.
Right.
We just can't keep going.
But thank you so much for having me on every month. This is so much fun.
Well, thank you for coming every month and joining me and talking ghosty stuff and telling us these great stories. I think the one that I liked the most was the haunted chocolate shop. That was my favorite. Anytime a guy can be pushed down the stairs for just because I hate men, that's good.
Well, I am currently working on a ghost a day book, a ghost story for every day of the year, and I decided not to write about the Valentine's Day massacre. That's been overdone, so I found this story instead. So that story is going to be in the book.
That is going to be Valentine's Day, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well, Sylvia, thanks for joining me yet again. I'm going to leave the house and take a few of these chocolates with me.
Please do.
And head back to the state of Washington.
Bye, Ron.
Well, we blew the doors off the time again. 37 minutes. Ghost Stories with Sylvia was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Great treats for your dog to eat. I always have a great time talking with Sylvia. She's so good at telling stories. If you want to visit her on her own turf, head to sylviashults.wordpress.com. There you will find her blog and access to her amazing podcast, Lights Out. Thank you, Sylvia. Gladys Goodies isn't just about dog treats anymore. They have them for cats, and my kitty absolutely loves them. You can get these treats and some really cool swag for your dog and cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our promo code RONS and get a 20% discount on all your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. We have one last email for this week, and it's from Olive French. Olive is an avid old-time radio enthusiast and wanted to know what my favorite OTR commercial was. I really had to sit down and think about this one. My best answer is to say I love them all, but the truth is I do have a favorite. Rather than tell you about it, how about I play it?
Hello, boys and girls. It's me, the Frito Bandito. You know what I heard about you? I heard you want to be a Frito Bandito like me. You do? Then you must sing the Bandito song. Let's sing together. You just follow the bouncing Fritos corn chips bag. Ay, 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 ay. I am the Frito Bandito. Hey, I like Fritos corn chips. I love them, I do. I want Fritos corn chips. I'll get them from you. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, I am the Frito Bandito. Give me Fritos corn chips and I'll be your friend. The Frito Bandito, you must not offend. Now, boys and girls, you are Frito Banditos too. You sing the Frito Bandito song, and you loco for crunchy Fritos corn chips. That's nice. Munch, munch, munchy, munchy Fritos corn chips.
Now you might be asking, why? Well, it's because I truly am a Frito Bandito to this day. Danged if I don't love to snack on those little guys, and I think if we're all honest, that is a darn good commercial. My guess is it's going to be stuck in your head all day today. That's it for episode number 423. I want to thank Bent Heridian, Alton Chung, Gabriel Jordan, Jesse Simmons, Olive French, and of course, Sylvia Shults. Great stuff today, guys. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find an amazing number of links that should fit every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This helps us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's amazing stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.